The wind cut across the frozen field like a whip, carrying with it the metallic tang of blood and gunpowder. Benjamin Moore huddled in the shallow trench, his uniform stiff and soaked with mud and sweat. Around him, the remnants of the Union Army whispered in the darkness, their breaths visible in the frigid air, mingling with the curling smoke from distant cannon fire. Each flare illuminated a brief snapshot of the battlefield, broken fences, frozen earth, and shadows of men crouching, waiting for an order that might never come. "Stay low," Sergeant Collins hissed, pressing against Benjamin's shoulder. "They're watching. Every move." Benjamin nodded, though his hands trembled. The cold had seeped into his bones, and the weight of the rifle in his arms felt heavier with every heartbeat. Somewhere beyond the trench, a groan rose, a wounded man, left between the lines. Benjamin swallowed hard, the sound of suffering curling like smoke in his chest. He thought of his father, long gone, speaking beside a warm fire on a winter night years ago. "Courage, Benjamin. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving forward despite it." The words felt hollow now, lost in the howl of the wind and the shadow of the coming battle. A sudden flare tore across the field, casting everything in orange light for a fleeting moment. Benjamin saw dozens of figures frozen mid-step, rifles raised, faces blurred by smoke and shadow. The night pressed on him, thick and suffocating, as if the earth itself sought to swallow him whole. Benjamin thought of Anna, her hair falling over her shoulders in sunlight, her smile that could ignite warmth, even on the coldest day. Letters from her were folded and stuffed into his coat pocket, each word a fragile tether to a world beyond war. "My love, keep your heart strong, even when the world seems lost. I wait for you." The sound of distant artillery jolted him. A stifled scream carried across the frozen earth. Benjamin's stomach twisted. He wanted to move, to help, but the mud and open ground were death traps. Every instinct screamed to survive. Every memory screamed to act. Private Jacobs, sitting a few feet away, murmured, "I don't know how much longer we can last like this." His voice shook, despite the attempt to sound steady. Benjamin only nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. Words were useless here. Only endurance mattered. Only waiting, with the hope that dawn might bring some mercy. The cries grew nearer. Benjamin's eyes adjusted to the darkness, picking out shapes sprawled across the field. Groans of the wounded, some silent, some soft and pleading. Among them a familiar figure caught his attention. David, his best friend, lying on the frozen earth, arm twisted beneath him, face pale in the dim light. Benjamin's chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at him to rush forward, to pull David out of the mud and blood. But he knew the risk. Every second outside the trench could be fatal. He pressed against the cold earth, biting back a scream. Whispering his friend's name felt almost sacrilegious, as if saying it louder would summon danger itself. But no answer came, only the wind, carrying with it the echo of gunfire, distant screams, and the relentless march of night. The hours crawled, heavy and unyielding. Benjamin's mind replayed every moment with David. Laughter in campfires, shared meals, quiet promises. Now, those memories were a chain, binding him to a decision he was not yet ready to make. He thought of the dawn, faint on the horizon, a pale smear against the smoke-stained sky. Would it bring salvation, or only more suffering? The night seemed eternal, each heartbeat a drum counting down to an outcome he could not yet see. Benjamin closed his eyes, leaning back against the trench wall, and waited, trapped between fear, loyalty, and the cold, unforgiving darkness. The first light of dawn bled weakly across the horizon, a pale smear struggling against the smoke and frost. Benjamin Moore's trench was glazed with ice, and the air carried the sharp bite of winter. Around him, soldiers stirred like shadows, some crawling, some slipping into unconsciousness from exhaustion and cold. The night had not ended. It had merely shifted, becoming a different kind of threat. Benjamin's eyes kept returning to the field beyond the trench, where wounded men lay frozen or groaning softly. Among them, David had not moved. A lump of mud in uniform obscured his figure, but Benjamin recognized the curve of his friend's shoulder, the tilt of his head. Fear coiled in his chest, tightening with every shallow breath. He remembered their childhood, playing along the banks of the Susquehanna River, laughing at nothing, dreaming of futures far from this battlefield. Those memories were a cruel contrast to the present, a reminder of what the war had stolen. Now, loyalty demanded action, yet reason warned against it. Every step beyond the trench was a gamble with death. Benjamin pulled a folded letter from his coat, the edges stiff from the cold. Anna's handwriting shimmered faintly in the dim light. "Hold on, Benjamin. I will wait, no matter how long." The paper trembled in his gloved hands. It was a lifeline, fragile yet unbroken, tethering him to a life beyond frost, smoke, and gunfire. Yet the words also weighed on him. They reminded him of what was at stake, not just survival, but the preservation of humanity amid chaos. Private Jacobs, crouched beside him, shifted uneasily. "They're moving again," he whispered, eyes darting toward the faint outline of Union lines preparing to advance. Benjamin swallowed, nodding silently. Each soldier knew the rules. Follow orders, survive if you can. But what of the men left between lines, groaning in mud and blood? What of David? Benjamin's fingers tightened around his rifle. The first rays of sunlight caught the metal, glinting like a warning. Each shadow could conceal a rifle, each drift of smoke a snare. Yet he could not turn away. The wind shifted, carrying with it the acrid tang of gunpowder and something far older. The iron scent of blood mingled with the frozen earth. Benjamin peered again at David. His friend's eyes fluttered half open, dull with pain. Pale lips cracked from the cold. Recognition sparked, then exhaustion pulled them under again. Benjamin's heart hammered. The choice lay before him, stark and unyielding. Stay in the trench and live, or move into the open and risk everything to save his friend. He closed his eyes briefly, recalling Anna's letter, his father's words about courage, and the countless small acts of bravery that had defined his life. Action, he realized, was the only answer. Waiting had carried him to this edge, and the line between fear and courage had narrowed until it vanished entirely. He took a deep breath, the cold air searing his lungs. Each heartbeat felt amplified, each shadow more threatening. Yet beneath the terror was a strange, stubborn clarity. Some bonds, friendship, loyalty, love, were worth more than life itself. The wind moaned through the broken fence posts, and somewhere in the distance, a cannon fired. It was a sound that promised nothing but demanded attention, a reminder that the world beyond the trench was indifferent to fear or hesitation. Benjamin knew the moment of decision had arrived. Around him, the soldiers of the Union Army began moving, a slow, rhythmic shuffle. Orders were whispered, boots scraped across frozen mud. Rifles clanked as men readied for the inevitable advance. Benjamin remained crouched, eyes locked on David, calculating every movement, every breath, every chance of survival. Jacobs leaned closer, whispering, "We can try, but it's madness out there." Benjamin only nodded. Madness and loyalty often walked hand in hand on battlefields. He did not speak. Words were useless now. Silence carried more weight than any command. A flare lit the sky, briefly casting the field in an eerie glow. Benjamin saw shapes move, shadows stretch, and the frozen earth reflected their struggle. The wounded cried softly, whispers lost to the wind, and the first true light of dawn shimmered across the icy ground. It was a cruel, beautiful kind of clarity. The day demanded action, and the choice was now his. Benjamin inhaled the bitter air, muscles taut, mind honed on a single terrifying thought. Survival alone would be empty if David was left behind. And so, the decision solidified, silent yet unyielding. When the sun rose, Benjamin Moore would cross the line, into the open, into danger, into the uncertain arms of fate. Benjamin Moore rose slowly, muscles stiff, teeth chattering in the frozen morning air. The trench seemed suddenly too small, too confining. Every instinct screamed to stay low, to wait, to survive. But every memory of David, lying wounded and alone, pushed him forward. He glanced at Private Jacobs, who nodded grimly, understanding without words. Then, with a deep, shuddering breath, Benjamin stepped into the open mud of the battlefield. Each step was deliberate, careful, as if the earth itself might betray him. The snow crunched beneath his boots, loud against the heavy silence of the dawn. Every shadow could hide a rifle, every drift of smoke a trap. Cannon fire echoed in the distance, sharp and indifferent. Yet Benjamin moved, heart hammering, mind narrowed to one singular purpose: reach his friend, whatever the cost. "David," he whispered under his breath, voice trembling, almost drowned by the wind. The groan of a wounded man answered faintly, and Benjamin saw the familiar shape twisted in the mud. Recognition sparked in David's eyes, then fear, then relief. "Be Ben," David rasped, voice weak. Benjamin knelt beside him, mud soaking his gloves, cold seeping into every bone. He took David's arm, testing the weight. "I've got you," he said, forcing a grim smile. "We'll get through this. Together." David tried to rise, faltering. Benjamin steadied him, feeling the fragile pulse of life beneath his fingers. Around them, the battlefield remained silent, almost waiting, as if the earth itself held its breath. Each step forward was a gamble. The frozen mud clung to their boots, slowing them. The open field stretched like an expanse of doom. Shadows long, smoke curling, every sound amplified. Benjamin's mind raced with every possible danger. But retreat was no longer an option. Loyalty demanded action. He thought briefly of Anna's letter, her words fragile yet enduring. "I will wait." He drew strength from that thought, realizing that courage was more than surviving. It was acting despite fear. He refused to let the war strip him of his humanity. The horizon began to glow with morning light, but it brought no comfort, only clarity. The path ahead was uncertain, each step a confrontation with chance and fate. Yet Benjamin pressed on, supporting his friend, feeling the cold, the mud, the weight of history pressing down. A distant cannon boomed, shaking the earth. Benjamin froze for a heartbeat, every nerve alert, but he could not stop. David leaned on him, weary but alive. The sun rose fully now, casting long shadows across the field, illuminating both danger and possibility. The battlefield was silent but alive, each frozen figure a reminder that survival was tenuous, that every choice carried consequence. Benjamin knew that even if they made it across this field, the war would not be over. Yet, the act itself, choosing to move, to risk everything for a friend, was its own kind of victory. Benjamin Moore and David trudged forward, one step at a time into the unknown. Each breath clouded in the cold morning air, each heartbeat a promise that courage, loyalty, and friendship could endure even in the darkest hours. The field stretched ahead, uncertain and treacherous. The night had ended, the battle had only begun. And somewhere beyond the horizon, fate waited, silent, watchful, and indifferent. Benjamin did not look back. He could not. Every moment demanded his full resolve. He stepped into the light of dawn, carrying hope, fear, and the unbroken bond of friendship into the fragile promise of survival.